This week on Supercars Talk, we have an actual calendar to talk about, and 23 Red Racing goes the way of the dodo into extinction. This week it was announced that Phil Mundy is pulling the pin on his 23 Red Racing team. Apparently Milwaukee Tools, who is their major sponsor, is using COVID-19 as an excuse to pull their sponsorship. This seems strange as tool sales seem to be up over the COVID-19 thing. The construction industry, which would be the main consumer of these power tools, has been continuing as though nothing has happened. I know I'm in the construction industry and currently we're going fine. And with all the DIY sales that are happening, now okay, Milwaukee isn't, they're not aiming at a lot of those DIY sales, but I know a lot of people who buy Milwaukee gear at home for their, as you can see, I'm more of a Ryobi budget, but I know a lot of people who have bought Milwaukee gear to use for themselves at home. So I don't think COVID-19 is really, you couldn't say declining sales are an issue. Maybe there's a bit more of a bigger issue there at Milwaukee than some of the other tool brands, which seem to be going well at this stage. Now, Milwaukee pulling out kind of leads to me that there's some bigger funding issues with the team because, sponsors come and go, and the one that I can really think of where a team shut shop because of sponsor pulling the pin was Gary Rogers Motorsport last year. Okay, that is a very current example, but it's not like, Walkinshaws have had different sponsors over the last few years. Tickford's kind of, over its time, been a revolving door of sponsors. Triple Eight, they lost Vodafone, or they lost Better Electrical, got Vodafone, they lost Vodafone, and they got Red Bull kind of thing. Sponsors come and go, pulling the pin isn't, it isn't what most teams do when they lose a sponsor. They kind of go and find another one. What I think's been happening is that Phil's been pumping in more money than what, say, Milwaukee has. Maybe Milwaukee's been 30-40% of the budget and the rest of it's kind of been topped up by Phil Mundy, and he's just, enough is enough. I'm not prepared to put in 100% of the budget for the rest of the year. So he's decided, well, if we're not going to have a major sponsor, I'm just going to pull the pin on the whole thing. A bit sad because the team was looking quite good this year. I think Will Davison is currently sitting 5th in the points. I think both races in Adelaide, he finished just off the podium. Will be interesting to see what happens with him, as will his co-driver for the endurance races, Jack Perkins. Two really good drivers that all of a sudden now become available. If I was someone like Tickford, I might be thinking, hey, I've got a good opportunity here to shuffle one of the other drivers out into maybe co-driver land and bring Will in as a full-timer drive. I think Cam Waters is fine where he is. A couple of the others, maybe. And maybe a few other guys at some other teams, maybe kind of looking over their shoulder, because Will was my dark horse for the championship this year. I think he's one of the few guys out there that probably could, mount a full season championship. He's not... the way I rate the drivers at the moment, you've got Scott McLaughlin up here, and then you've got a heap of guys that are, just kind of off that absolute level of Scott McLaughlin. Of course, Van Gisbergen, Whincup, and then I'd put guys, like Will Davison kind of, right knocking on the heels with your Chas Mosserts and stuff. And then you've got, your next level of like your Cam Waters and stuff that they're not going to win the championship, but they're quite more than capable of winning quite a few races. So anyway, be interesting to see what happens with that. Apparently this now opens up the door for Tickford have said they want to run 4 cars still. So the logical here is Mr. Courtney with Mr. Boost money come in. You've got, a ready-made car, that's ready to go out and essentially win races, as Will was proving at the start of the year. Where this leaves the third car that Courtney was going to run at Erebus, potentially, where that leaves that whole thing, maybe Will Brown might get a few runs in that car this year if it happens, but I think that was a bit more dependent on the Boost sponsorship coming to Erebus than what it was Erebus, fully prepared to run a third car this year. We have an actual calendar to talk about again. Now, hopefully that comes out on film. I spent a lot of time preparing this board. So, we have 13 rounds, apparently. The first one, of course, was in February in Adelaide. It feels like a lifetime ago, and it feels weird that it's going to be part of this championship. But believe it or not, that's still in there. Winner was Scott McLaughlin. Round 2. They're counting that as a round. Apparently because they practiced and qualified there, so it counts as a round. Albert Park. Okay. I'm trying to remember. I think Van Gisbergen had one of the poles. That's about all I remember from that fateful weekend now. Round 3. As predicted, Eastern Creek. It's going to happen in 6 weeks' time. That is exciting. It ties in well with the E-Series stuff finishing, and thank God we don't have to talk about a video game anymore. We can talk about some proper racing with proper cars. They are talking about this could be like a drive-in event where, a lucky amount of people can drive their cars in and watch from the side of the track. Not sure how they organise all of that and keep people in their cars. Unless you're taking some big piss jugs in with you, people will need to go to the toilets at some point. Granted, it will probably only be like a couple of sprint races or maybe one longer race or something. So you're not going to be sat there in your car all day. You drive in essentially to watch the race, I suppose. But still, people need to use the facilities at some point. So anyway, if there is spectators there, they'll be sat in cars, not in the grandstand. July, we go to Winton. No surprises there. August, we go to Hidden Valley. Once again predicted. End of August, Townsville. I thought no chance we're going to have any street races other than Bathurst. But apparently we go to Townsville. Apparently they're happy to have no spectators there. Not sure how that all works. Maybe it's an infrastructure kind of Townsville thing. We will not be seeing Newcastle or the Gold Coast on the calendar. But Townsville's there. It's great. Usually good racing at Townsville, so I'm all about that. September, The Bend. Now, apparently this might not be any part of the Enduro Cup. I can't see why we wouldn't have it as part of the Enduro Cup. Bathurst is still going to be a 1000k co-driver race, so there's only one team that has a co-driver that's not currently in either Australia or New Zealand at the moment. That is Tickford with Alex Premer. As I've just said, Will Davison, Jack Perkins are both looking for co-drives, I assume now, because they haven't got full-time drives. Will Davison should. That's another matter. But I can't see why. It's not like we can't get co-drivers. We're kind of coming around to the fact that we're going to have to watch an endurance race at the Bend. So let's make it happen this year when everything's a bit weird. So anyway, October we're going to Bathurst. That's good. Might be weird without spectators there or limited spectators, but at least it's happening. End of October we go to Wanneroo. I'm surprised we're travelling that far, but it's still, October's still a long way away. It doesn't kind of feel like it, but it is. November we go to Simmons once again. I'm surprised we're travelling that far, but it is a long time away. I possibly, with these two and that one, might not be surprised if we end up back at Eastern Creek for one of those, depending on what happens with everything, borders and blah, blah, blah. So we've been to Simmons. December, Sandown. this should be another endurance event. So we have a 3-round Enduro Cup to keep that going for each year, and Sandown should have a 500k Enduro instead of what is going to be a terrible endurance race at the Bend. New Zealand in January, we haven't decided whether that's at Pukekohe or Hampton Downs. I think it should be at Pukekohe, but because they've got a contract to run at Hampton Downs now for this year, I think that's to fill that, although it's next year now as well. And then February, Bathurst. Instead of the 12-hour, we're going to have some Supercars races. Now, all you 12-hour apologists, of course, everyone's having a cry. Oh, I'd prefer to see the GT3 cars rather than the Supercars, blah, 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 kind of thing. Well, the GT3 race is not going to happen because there's still going to be travel restrictions at that point. So how do you get all of these Europeans and that we don't know who they are or whatever, that, you love because you can brag to everyone about how, oh, I love this, I can't even think of some bloke that we've never heard of. Oh, he's great. He did this in GT3, blah, 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 blah. Like, they're not going to be able to come for the race. The teams aren't going to be able to come for the race. So you're not going to have much of a 12-hour. Supercars has, they own the event now. Essentially, they've got to put an event on. So let's have it as a Supercars. It will be weird finishing in February and at Bathurst, probably because Adelaide won't be far away. Not sure how that kind of moves the calendar for next year. Albert Park might be an interesting one next year as well, depending on what happens with travel restrictions, whether we, we'll see Formula 1 again next year. But it will be interesting basically finishing one championship and then starting the next, unless we start to see this roll into the summer series that Sean Seamer wants. If it was up to me, I don't really want to see a summer series, but, they want to try and get away from the football. Like, let's take it. It's not like all the football fans are going to go, oh, there's no football to watch. Let's watch car racing. Like, people can watch two things in one weekend. So that's the calendar. I'm a little bit surprised that we don't see Phillip Island and Queensland Raceway on there. I would have thought they would have definitely been on there, and I would have thought we would have been going to Eastern Creek twice, but things could change. So that's where we're at the moment. Let's see how it plays out. So that covers off the new calendar that was announced this week and the end of 23 Red Racing. One of the more interesting team names that we've had. Not quite as good as Team Techno, but I suppose a bit more interesting than them calling it Phil Mundy Racing or something like that. Anyway, you can get in contact with me, supercarstalk@gmail.com, or if you think I'm an idiot or something, leave a comment down in the comments section. And until next time, I'll see you later.
I've met so many people who look the same. Most were forgotten, but you still remain.